Okay, welcome everybody to Wall Street Reporter's next super stock live stream, January 25th. We are actually live now. Sorry guys for the late start. We had a slight technical issue, which was actually quite amusing, but here we are live. So we got Pharmadrug, a new stock we're introducing. This is the debut live stream for Pharmadrug, PHRX in Canada, LMLLF in the US. We got Dan Cohen, the CEO. We have Paul Van Slyke, the Chief Science Officer. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
Good to be here.
Absolutely. So, guys, for anybody that's brand
I just wanted to correct before we get started. It's LMLLF.
There we go.
LMLLF.
Here we go. So let me just change that. Let me just very important. We got to get the right symbol. LM. Okay. This is we got the right one on this one, and we got on the other one we have LML. Dan, we're gonna have to make a simpler symbol for the U.S. market.
Yes, we do.
We're gonna have to change it. We have to simplify. But for anybody that's brand new to our program, our goal is to bring you those stocks which have that 10x to 100x upside potential, no matter how complicated their stock symbol is. And we've had some major winners in the last several years, stocks that have increased, from 10x to 50x. And I'm really excited that Pharmadrug actually really has a lot of things in common with two of our biggest winners. That's Cytodyne. It's a stock that increased from 50 cents to $10.01. So it was a 20 bagger in about 12 months, or it was maybe 18 months. And of course, Empower Clinics, CBDT in Canada, which went from a nickel to $2.50 in 4 months. So
actually, we sold them some assets.
Oh, you did? Oh,
yeah.
There you go. So there's some interest. It's kind of maybe lightning will strike 3 times here. So I'm looking forward to learning more about Pharmadrug, and I'm sure everybody in our audience is looking to get the details and see if this is going to be our next. We haven't had a 100 bagger yet. We've had a 50 bagger, so you could be number 3.
The first one in this space. Well, we think we have a good opportunity for that, but. Should I get started, or sorry?
No. So just for anybody that's new, and we have a lot of new people watching now from your side, from Pharmadrug shareholders. Our goal with Wall Street Reporter's next super stock live stream is to bring you again those stocks which have a 10x to 100x upside. So these are companies that are going after multi-billion-dollar market opportunities. They have multiple catalysts in place, and they're at a key inflection point right now. And Pharmadrug, if anybody that's looking at their news release, of course, all the shareholders know this, but this company definitely looks like it's at that inflection point, and definitely the catalysts are there. So I'm looking forward to learning more, and hopefully we'll get some great audience questions, and then guys, decide for yourself if Pharmadrug is going to be that 20 bagger, maybe even 100 bagger. So with that said, Dan, just give us a snapshot for new people. What does Pharmadrug do in the drug development space?
So in the drug development space, we're focused on two different silos. It's really a company here that's got multiple shots on goal. So we have some development efforts on the psychedelic side, which we're really excited about and we're going to want to talk about. But also Cepharanthine is a drug that we have the exclusive rights to, a reformulated, much more potent or highly bioavailable version of a drug that's been in Japan for 70 years. And we're using that to go after rare cancers and infectious diseases. We've already gotten esophageal cancer. We got an orphan drug designation from the FDA for esophageal cancer. So we're already started on that path, and we're going to have more cancers that we're going to be able to talk about soon. And on the infectious diseases side, we've started a process on COVID, but not just COVID. We think that this drug can be potentially used for many type of flu type sicknesses, whether it's SARS, whether it's MERS, H1N1s. I think there's potential for many different types of viruses. And we know the world needs more antiviral medications. So, on the Cepharanthine side, we're very active. And we have, two different approaches there. And on the psychedelic side, we have two different approaches as well. On the DMT side, we're doing two things. One, we're going to be using DMT to develop a treatment for glaucoma, and we'll talk about that and why we think that it's pretty unique versus what other people are doing out there in psychedelics. Also, it's something that can be highly patentable because we're going to be developing a formulation with a very specific delivery technology. And we're working with Johns Hopkins University to work on foundational research on DMT, which, I don't think you can think of a higher caliber academic institution in terms of working on psychedelic research. So that's a quick snapshot. All of those activities.
There's a lot here to unpack.
Becoming clinical trials. Just one or two of those could be that 10 to 20 bagger. And we have multiple shots on goals. We have 4, maybe even more opportunities to develop into clinical trials. And so we're extremely excited about that. We think the market needs to understand that and know what we've already done and what we're going to continue to do over the next 6, 9, 12 months to get to that value creation. And it's going to be continuous value creation. And we're going to talk about that today.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack. I want to get into the details. So, what I find compelling here again is, I find that from an investor standpoint, it's really important to have, again, this opportunity where you have this, as you say, multiple shots on goal, potentially, billion-dollar market opportunities. So essentially, Cepharanthine. Let's get into this. So which kind of indications are you going after? How big are these market opportunities? What's kind of the competitive landscape like? Like what makes Cepharanthine so special?
Well, let's start on the cancer. Well, first, let's step back for a second and just talk about what Cepharanthine is. So, Cepharanthine is a drug that's been in use in Japan for over 70 years. So we know it's safe, and we know that it's effective in what it's been used for. The problem with Cepharanthine was that it had low bioavailability. So, if you have 100 milligrams of a drug, doesn't mean your body takes 100 milligrams into its system. The bioavailability of Cepharanthine was extremely low, 6, 7%. So while they knew it could be used for rare cancers or all types of cancers and infectious diseases, its use was a little bit limited because of how weak it was when you took it in oral format. What we have is a reformulated version of it that takes the 6 to 7% bioavailability, knocks it up to 70 to 80%. So that's almost 10 times as strong. So now you can use this potentially for cancers and other indications. I don't know if Paul wants to add a little bit about that in terms of Cepharanthine.
Yeah, so I think the activity of the drug was well appreciated, but it just did not lend itself to a clinical application or a home application. And so individuals that have received it over the years in Japan for serious illness have had to do so by IV infusion. And so what we really aim to do is to be able to deliver this drug in an oral format to be taken at home. And that really lends itself to oral antivirals, obviously with the pandemic that's going on and future pandemics to come, but also for cancer treatment so that patients don't need to be going to the hospital regularly for infusions.
Okay, so a pill obviously is much more compelling than any type of needle injection, IV. Makes a much more compelling drug. And I think from what I understand is, I think you may have told me this, Dan, is that so Cepharanthine originally, you got this drug originally was developed for to treat Ebola.
Yeah. So what happened was that about 5 years ago we had a major Ebola crisis, and there was a nonprofit high caliber research institute in the U.S. that was tasked with finding an ability to treat the Ebola. They knew about Cepharanthine. They figured out a way. It took them a bit of time, but they figured out a way how to increase that bioavailability significantly. Problem was that by the time they finished developing it, the Ebola crisis had subsided. At least to the extent of the people that asked them to develop it didn't need it anymore. So then they realized that they had this asset that they didn't have the wherewithal, because they're not a commercial firm, they're not a for-profit company. They didn't have the ability to do anything with it, so they formed an alliance with the company that we acquired, Serayo, and that's how we got our hands on it. So this is a drug that's at least 10 times more powerful than the version that's been used safely in Japan for the past 70 years. And so with that, we saw right away, just by research that other people can do, we should be going after cancers and we should be going after infectious diseases.
Okay.
Let's start with the cancer.
So essentially with Cepharanthine, you have, again, it's the key thing for, I think, investors to understand is that, you have this potentially platform, this billion-dollar platform for, developing multiple drugs, multiple indications. This could be a tremendous opportunity. The very similar thing happened with Cytodine again, and that was a stock that went from 50 cents to $10. I think it went to a $5 billion market cap at one point. A lot of things in common with Pharmadrug. I'm sorry, Dan, I interrupted you. I was just
going to start with the cancer. As soon as we acquired Cepharanthine, the first thing we realized we had to do is go after cancer. So we filed for orphan drug designation with the FDA for our Cepharanthine to be used on esophageal cancer, specifically esophageal cancer, because you want orphan drug designation because that protects you in terms of, kind of like a patent protection, makes it a cheaper, easier process to get through the FDA, and that gives you better economics. And this could be a huge market for us. Esophageal cancer has been climbing significantly over the past several years. And the problem with esophageal cancer is that they have no real treatment. They use chemo. Esophageal cancer develops a resistance to chemo. So it might work at first, but then it starts to fall apart. So it's generally known that if you have esophageal cancer, unfortunately, it's not looking good for you. And within a few years, you can pass away. So there's a great demand to find a treatment for esophageal cancer. So we received that orphan drug designation, and we started working on our own test. Even though there's a lot of research done by a lot of different universities and research houses, we needed to develop our own data, and we started immediately working on that. And so we've done 2 rounds of tests. One of them, we looked at 60 cancers just to make sure that we're looking at all the cancers that make sense. And 20 of the cancers came back and showed that Cepharanthine versus chemo was just as potent, maybe even more potent in the study. And the best part about it was that esophageal cancer was the best by far. It was 5 times more powerful than chemo in that study. So we repeated that study again a second time, and we did it in not just alone, but also in combination with chemo. And there we found again that Cepharanthine and esophageal cancer had the best relationship. But we also found several other cancers where that combination effect came in, where using them together had an additional impact. We're actually working on filing patents right now, and that's going to be adding to the Cepharanthine cancer story. And so we're developing right now. We actually have animal tests that have begun, and we're going to be able to get results for esophageal cancer and this yet undisclosed cancer because we haven't filed patents yet. We're going to be getting that over the next couple of months.
Okay, so one of the things that's I think most compelling, or the question everybody really wants to know is okay, what's the path for Pharmadrug, for PHRX to be that the next 20 bagger plus, maybe our first 100 bagger. Again, very similar to what we had with Cytodine, that was up 20x, Empower Clinics 50x. What's the path? Dan, what's the path maybe to commercialization, like over the next, how close are you going to get there? Because obviously, you don't need to be, at the commercial stage, but as you kind of move along that path, the story gets de-risked, the company becomes much more valuable than it is right now. So what's the kind of the path over the next year, like how to get to what stage are you at now? Where are you going?
So we're preclinical. We've already started discussions with the FDA just on Cepharanthine. So we did something called a pre-IND meeting last November. And that's where we actually approached the FDA with a large scientific, document, basically submitting to say, in order to start a clinical trial, this is what we have. What else do we need for you to give us the go-ahead to start a clinical trial? So we did that specifically for COVID, actually, not for cancer. But the great thing about it, that kind of meeting, is that you got to satisfy 2 criteria. A, the research that you've done on Cepharanthine to treat COVID, but you also have to present your version of Cepharanthine or your drug, because the great majority of clinical trials that fail because they can't produce a drug that is pharmaceutical caliber. You might have this molecule sitting in a lab, but when you actually have to produce that pharmaceutical grade pill, it falls apart. And we had some really good feedback. They love where we're at in terms of developing the cepharanthine itself as an oral pill. So that we got some great feedback on. We're going to be starting soon to develop a batch that's going to go through the final testing to be able to be used in a clinical trial, i.e. to be used in humans. That's going to happen over the next 3 to 6 months. And we're just going to be finishing off the extra studies that they want to see done on COVID side. But the great thing as well is that that feedback can be used directly for the cancer side as well. So we're going to be working simultaneously to develop cepharanthine to be able to be approved to be used in clinical trials, and developing for it to be used on the infectious diseases side, specifically for COVID, and on the cancer side. Our main focus right now is esophageal cancer, but as you see, we'll be adding to that cancer list as time moves on. So over the next year, you're going to see us moving towards clinical trials for cepharanthine on the COVID side and on the esophageal cancer side, as we add more capability through our research to broaden that out even more.
Okay, and again, so essentially, you have with cepharanthine, you have a platform, going after multiple different market and multiple indications. Paul, do you want to address the main thing is obviously the the patents, the intellectual property portfolio. Like, give us kind of the your take on that.
Sure. So currently we have exclusive rights on a reformulated version of cepharanthine. One of the issues obviously was related to bioavailability. And so this patent, I think it was 2016. So we have about 25 years left, or excuse me, 15 years left in patent life on that patent. But what we're doing in the background with the efficacy studies is we're specifically designing them so that we can develop methods of use patent, different formulation, different manufacturing type intellectual property, so that we can continue to expand that time horizon around the indications that we pursue. And I would say from the standpoint of the indications that we're looking at, really we look to borrow from one another. So the studies that we're currently doing, the particular efficacy studies for the indications are distinct, but almost all of the safety toxicology, the in vitro genotox, all of those boilerplate studies that the FDA requires before you can put a drug into humans, they're basically the same, regardless of whether you're pursuing COVID or oncology. So we can be a lot more efficient in how we spend our money and move the program forward, tackling two things at once.
I think it should be noted, though, and I know I've mentioned it already, but I'll say it again because it can't be underestimated here, is that this is a drug that's been in use in Japan for 70 years. And although we have a more potent version of it, we still have an understanding of how much of it can go into the body and still be safe. So just because we give it more quickly doesn't mean that we don't have an understanding of how much the body is able to take. So although we're going through the standard off-the-shelf testing that the FDA requires, we already know that it's something that's gonna be okay.
Okay, so one of the big, so I guess one of the big kind of the unknowns is always the kind of the toxicology, the safety aspect, to get there. So essentially that part you're saying has been mostly de-risked here because of the 70-year track record of safety, use in Japan.
I think Paul can add to that. Sure.
Yeah, I think I would say that as much as any, scientist would ever say that they're confident about, a safety profile. But I think 70 years probably has taught us what to expect going into these studies. The human studies in Japan, back when this was approved, certainly they looked at doses by IV route of administration where you can get very high circulating levels of the drug. They did that repeatedly in humans at high concentrations without severe adverse events. So I think, we can be reasonably confident that the approach that we're taking at the doses that we're taking will be safe. And now we're really focused on manufacturing the drug and really fully evaluating the efficacy in multiple different opportunities.
Okay. Now, what about, okay, so we've covered Cepharanthine, but now, we're going to have to do, because there's a lot to unpack. We have, again, multiple shots on goal. You got Cepharanthine, you have DMT. We're going to have to probably do this over the space of a few interviews, where we're going to focus in on, each one of these opportunities. But
that being said, I think we should mention a little bit more about COVID and as an antiviral, and I think Paul can speak to that, just in terms of how it's broadly known in the scientific community, the power that Cepharanthine has. This is not something that we uncovered by ourselves.
Yeah, so this was really quite a remarkable finding, and at first, I was quite resistant to the idea of being another us two sort of company. We're pursuing COVID because it's the flavor of the day. It actually got to the point where it was almost impossible to avoid the subject, because what was going on in the background was all these very large drug repurposing screens, where independent groups around the world, back when COVID first started showing up, started screening drugs which might have ready applicability to treating the COVID pandemic. So these are known research reagents, but also approved drugs. And repeatedly, now it's 5 independent screens have actually identified Cepharanthine as one of the most potent compounds ever screened against COVID. So, we're getting long into the COVID pandemic. And so you might wonder, well, what's next? We might actually be to the point where we're getting the better of this. There's new drugs showing up that are pretty decent antivirals, Pfizer being chief among them. So where does Pharmadrug sit in that landscape? And I would say, some of the interesting findings that have come out since COVID came along for Cepharanthine is actually the fact that Cepharanthine seems to also have potent antiviral activity against other coronaviruses, of which COVID is one. So it was shown to oppose infection by the original SARS. Daniel alluded to MERS, so Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. So these viruses that keep popping up sort of every 5 or 10 years and creating a crisis, Cepharanthine is actually showing excellent potency against other coronavirus family members. But Daniel also alluded to the fact that it's showing antiviral potency to Ebola, but also Zika. And so when we think about manufacturing Cepharanthine,
that was the thing that they had a couple of years ago, right? I think in Miami.
That's right. Yep. In Florida.
It seems like this is so. And I remember, it's interesting, the Ebola stocks. This is going back, I don't know, 5 plus. But anybody who's doing anything remotely, everything just exploded. And the Zika, so what's interesting here, these viruses, there's new viruses coming along like every week. Now you had what is it? You had the SARS, then of course COVID is the big one, but now you have variations of and we're gonna have like the viruses, like every year there's gonna be like a flavor of the week, unfortunately, and if you have something like that's a very powerful antiviral, this could be a massive catalyst for the stock at some point. This is just one of those.
That's the point. We were ignoring COVID at first, right?
Yeah.
And we're going after cancer. We're doing cancer, but we couldn't. And the reality is that we're going to develop this because the world needs more antivirals. And so this needs to get developed. I mean, what do you think? I mean, if it's showing this potential for so many different viruses, don't you think it should be developed? We do. And so we're going to be developing this for COVID. And if, first of all, we don't think one drug to treat COVID is going to be the panacea to end COVID.
No, there's always
once it gets approved, it can be used for several different viruses as they turn up, just like you said.
Right. We shouldn't talk about this too much, because on YouTube, a lot of these, the algorithm. Anytime you talk about the COVID or a treat,
we're going to get suppressed.
Censor it. So I'm not going to mention, but there's various treatments, and there's always new stuff for other et cetera, et cetera. So there's going to be some tremendous opportunities on that side. Okay, so I think at some point we're going to do a focus interview just on Cepharanthine, just on the multiple indications, that whole platform. Let's go into DMT. What are you doing in the psychedelics? Like, what kind of drugs are you developing based on those compounds?
So why don't we just start off by talking about DMT a little bit? DMT is a drug that shows up naturally throughout. It's prevalent in nature, and there's even arguments that it exists and it gets produced endogenously in the human brain. So this is a compound that we felt deserved a lot of focus. And so we've gone two approaches. We're working on foundational research. So we struck a deal with Johns Hopkins University, which is one of the premier psychedelic academic research bodies. And we're going to be working on, we're helping them. They're going to be developing a clinical trial. They're working on the submission to the FDA right now to do a clinical trial on DMT versus another psychedelic compound and in healthy humans. So the point of this is to, a lot of people are doing psychedelic research and they're saying, okay, we think this drug should be used for that type of sickness. And they're working backwards. Does it work or does it not work? I mean, psychedelic research has been repressed for so long that there's so much more work that needs to be done. And we need to figure out, how does DMT actually work in the human body, the biochemistry or the physiology of the DMT in the human body, so that once you understand how it works, then you can figure out different things that you can use it for. And that's the type of research we're going to be working on with Johns Hopkins University. That's on the foundational research side. And we were looking to start, a clinical trial this year on that. On our own developing, DMT to treat a disease, we're working on glaucoma. Glaucoma, although it's been around for a long time, and there are several drugs out there, people go blind continuously every year from glaucoma. So there is no one remedy that fixes it. And so we quickly realized that, and it was Paul's good work, that DMT has already shown some real potential in terms of being able to treat glaucoma. So we're doing something that we call the holy trinity of psychedelic research. You want a unique sickness because you don't want to be yet another person doing depression. You want a unique formulation. So you don't want to just take the drug as it is because it's a well-known drug and it's hard to patent. And then the third thing is that you want a unique delivery technology because that's something you can put a patent on, right? So I call that the holy trinity of psychedelic research. And so what we're doing is glaucoma. So that's a very original. No one else that we know of, maybe there is, but no one that we know right now out in the market is working on DMT and glaucoma. We're working on different versions of DMT. And then thirdly, we're working with an institute called the Terasaki Institute, which they're experts at developing delivery technologies. So we're going to create a device. Once we figure out which DMT, we're working on 2 or 3 different molecules right now to figure out what's the best one to use. And then once we chose which one we're going to use, we're going to group that with a delivery mechanism, something you put in your eye, and it continuously releases the DMT or the version that we're going to have in the eye. And we're going to bring that to the FDA to do a clinical trial. Okay. Said a lot there. Maybe Paul should back up.
Yeah, I was going to say, Paul,
how we even got to DMT and glaucoma.
Yeah, Paul, maybe can you add, give some color on how would DMT treat glaucoma? How does that work?
Right. So maybe I'll back up even just a little further. It's a bit of a weird concept to put a psychedelic drug into someone's eye to treat an illness, and so it really derives from a collection of observations that took place back in the mid 90s. It was found that the receptor that DMT binds to, the serotonin receptor, both 2A and 1A, so serotonin receptor 1A and 2A, are richly expressed in the eye, and in particular in a region that's well known to regulate pressure within the eye, the outflow tract. So that got some researchers interested in, well, why are those receptors there? And they wouldn't be there if they didn't serve a purpose. So they started activating those receptors in the eye, and what they found immediately was that it actually decreased pressure in the eye. Well, back during that time, it was very difficult to work with psychedelics, obviously in the US. And so they set about trying to develop a new candidate molecule that didn't have psychotropic properties. And they did. They tested it, and it worked remarkably well at reducing pressure in glaucoma models, animal models of glaucoma. So they took that to the clinic as an oral medication. So instead of applying it topically to the surface of the eye, they decided we want an easy format, 1 pill per day to treat elevated pressure in the eye. So they took it into the clinic, and what they found was when they gave individuals this pill, they actually displayed some cardiovascular toxicity and they stopped the program. And so when I was evaluating the literature around this, I thought to myself, well, that's likely because they were giving a high dose systemically to decrease the pressure in a very small tissue bed. And was that really necessary? And so when I started thinking about, well, what could we do to hit the same receptors, but do so at a much lower dose without systemic exposure? Because the observation that activating the serotonin receptors in the eye is sound. It decreases intraocular pressure. And so we reached out to the Terasaki group. They're an expert group in polymer formulations. And so we looked to develop this medical device that would deliver sub-psychotropic levels. It would be completely imperceptible, very low levels over a long period of time. Compliance is a major issue with glaucoma patients. So one, oftentimes people don't continually deliver the topical drops to their eyes. Often they'll do so only in advance of going to see their ophthalmologist. One of the other issues, it causes irritation, it causes redness. And so I would say the final, exactly. So the nocturnal fluctuations, of course, when you're sleeping, you can't be applying drops to your eyes. And so I think glaucoma is ideally suited for a sustained, long release, low dose formulation of a tryptamine, of which DMT is one, to activate the serotonin receptors to decrease pressure.
So what we're working on right now, just so people understand, we've narrowed it down. We started with 6 different types of DMT analogs, reformulations. We've narrowed it down to 2. We may have added a third, but we're working on the 2 different type of cell types in the eye. So we're going to use these 2 or 3 formulations on these cells to figure out what has the best optimal mix of, the least irritant, the strongest potency, and the longest duration, right? And once we figured out those tests, which one is the best for glaucoma, we'll narrow it down to that one compound, and then we'll do the in vivo testing, and then we'll develop the prototype. All that's going to happen this year.
Okay. So bottom line is, this company right now, the market cap is what? You have, I think,
It's under 20. Yeah.
Under $20 million. That's Canadian. So that's like 15 million US. So
Yeah.
it's like free basically. So it's like, so you get a $15 million market cap. You have potentially, you're addressing, multiple, really billion-dollar opportunities. I mean, these are all huge markets. Whether you talk about antivirals, you're talking about, the cancer markets. You're talking about the DMT, the optical health market is, $1 billion. Glaucoma, for sure. I don't know what the number is, but it's got to be in the billions.
Glaucoma is a huge indication.
Huge.
The incidence is really quite high. It's one of the leading causes of blindness around the world.
And if you could then obviously this is just kind of the start. Once you have these platforms, you can expand into other indications from there. So it's really very compelling. So 20 million market cap. If you get any traction with any of these, obviously the valuation starts to increase as the thing gets de-risked. So let me ask you now, in terms of the company, what else do you have going on? You have these 2, you have kind of these 2 platforms, DMT, you have Cepharanthine. What else do you have inside of Pharmadrug right now?
Outside of drug development, we got 2 other divisions, which is too much to talk about today.
But it's the legacy business. That was
we got a narcotics distributor in Germany that focuses on cannabis, medical cannabis, which is a market that's about to take off. And we've also focused on functional mushrooms, which is more of a nutraceutical, and we're working on that as well. But again, I don't want to muddy the story, but those are 2 other things that we're working on as well.
Okay. But are those operations, are you going to focus kind of on the
we're focusing on everything right now, but if you're going to ask me what can make this a 20 bagger over the next 9 months or so, it's the drug development. I mean, so that's really what I want people to understand, because like I said, multiple shots on goal, right? Like we got a path for 4 different clinical trials with the FDA. 1 or 2 of them can bring the stock 50 cents to $1. So, I mean, that's really what investors should be focused on right now.
Okay. What about okay? So development, everybody knows. It gets to be expensive, right? How are you? How are you doing in terms of, kind of your capital structure? Any need for raising capital in the future?
Well, look, at the end of the day, we're a biotech company. I'm not going to tell you that we're not going to have to raise money at some point, because every junior biotech company has to. And so, we're going to have to tap the market at some point. But right here, right now, we've prepaid for a lot of the work that we're doing over the next few months. That's going to be able to add tremendous value and already change the caliber of our research. And so we've prepaid for a lot of that work already. So, I think that we have a balance sheet right now to be able to continue to add value.
Okay. Let's get into some audience questions. So I think we got a lot of people in the live stream, so let's get into some audience questions. Somebody was asking about, or somebody I think was commenting on glaucoma. Okay, so DMT for glaucoma, it's kind of bizarre. Normally it's associated with the Peruvians use something called sanaga for optical health. Paul, are you familiar with sanaga?
I never heard of it. I agree. It is a bizarre concept to be using DMT for glaucoma, but really, I think that it's untapped science. The science is very strong.
We're not really looking to see if DMT is effective. We're looking to find the best formulation to use. As opposed to, can it help? We know it can. We're trying to find the best way to use it. Okay.
Comment here from Jenna: esophageal cancer. So this is you're developing a treatment for this with using Cepharanthine. So she's saying it's the 7th most common cause of cancer. 5-year survival rate, 20%. So this is it's a compelling market opportunity.
One of the things, like I said, that a lot of other cancers have other treatments out there, or the chemo is successful enough. For some reason, the chemo, the esophageal cancer develops a really strong resistance to the chemo. So we've already gotten that. We think that it could be potentially superior to chemo on esophageal cancer. What we still haven't been able to show yet, because we're still doing the work, is that we think that it can actually significantly reduce the resistance to chemo. So imagine you can actually use it in combination with chemo. A, that it works with the chemo, but B, that it reduces the cancer's resistance to chemo. If you put both of those together, that's absolutely game changing.
Okay. So interesting. Now, okay, so the company, it's had some pivots. Originally, you were in other kind of lines of business before getting to the drug development, which is, not unusual. And some of our biggest winners have been companies that pivoted, like Empower Clinics, which was, CBDT, of course, 50 bagger. And we got a question here. Are you collaborating with Redlight Holland on your psychedelic side?
Well, the reality is we have a very good relationship with them. We know Todd quite well. I know Todd quite well, and I like him a lot, and I like what they're doing. It's that, let's be honest, we've really started to focus on drug development. So is there cooperation of sorts in the Netherlands? Yes, but it's not our main focus right now.
Okay. I think this is the drug development side is a lot more upside potential than kind of recreational. Psychedelics is a little bit,
The Netherlands is a small country, right?
Yeah.
And I think Todd himself is already branching out and has done really good work in terms of focusing on new areas as well. So while we both were collaborating when we first started, I think we both moved into different directions. And so I'm not going to speak for Todd, but I'm sure he's hard at work in expanding the company in different ways.
Okay. Here's we had an interesting question. Okay, so this is a valid question. So, let's say you run into some roadblocks or some stumbles in terms of your commercialization process with Cepharanthine or even DMT. What are your backup plans here?
Well, we do have a narcotics cannabis distributor in Germany. I'm focusing on talking about the drug development because I think this is the one that can make us a 20 bagger over the next, time period. That doesn't mean that we're not continuing to develop, the German asset. And, we all know that, not everyone might not know, but there's a new government that was elected in Germany, and they took office in December. and they've stated straight out that their platform, one of their mandates is to introduce adult use legalization. Right now, it's only legal for medical purposes, and they're going to be expanding it throughout their term over the next couple of years to adult use, recreational use. And so we actually think it's a pretty exciting time to be in Germany for cannabis. So we have a lot of plans there. Which again, we want investors to focus on what we think has the most upside of Pharmadrug right now.
Okay. Let's see. Question: is Terry Booth still actively involved with
He
Pharmadrug?
is. I still speak to him. But it's not necessarily obvious, when we speak in terms of I don't press release that me and Terry and I had a conversation. But I do consult him for corporate matters, M&A, things of that sort, and strategy in general, because he's obviously extremely experienced in strategy.
Oh, and just for anybody who doesn't know, who's Terry Booth?
Terry Booth is the founder and the one who developed Aurora Cannabis into what it is, right? So he's no longer their CEO, but he was instrumental in making Aurora. So he took an interest in us. We were introduced. He liked our business plan. And he's a chairman of our advisory committee, and sometimes I speak to him more often, sometimes less. But he is someone that I call upon when I need advice.
Okay. Question here: how far would these strains of DMT be from what our bodies produce naturally? Are they synthetic?
Well, I'll let Paul answer that, because the question is what is being produced endogenously.
Yeah. So when I think about how to take what's known about DMT and then modify a drug and come up with something that makes sense to deliver as a drug substance. One of the major issues with using DMT is that it has a particularly short half-life in the body. So it's broken down almost immediately by monoamine oxidase. And so when you think about making a drug better, you look at potency, but you also look at resistance to breakdown. And so, we're working with analogs of DMT that have structures which lend themselves to working very similarly, but not being broken down quite as readily.
So there's a question there. The next step for COVID pill, Cepharanthine. So you're going to be hearing from us shortly in terms of, like I said, we got to develop the pill itself and not just the drugs, the sicknesses that you're focusing on. So we've had that meeting with the FDA, and they liked what we're doing on, it's called CMC, the chemistry, the manufacturing, and the control, how to produce a pharmaceutical grade pill. We're going to be ordering that batch in the short term to be able to get it to that caliber, do that off-the-shelf testing, do the stability testing in order to have that oral pill ready to be put into humans for a clinical trial. So we're working on that right now.
Okay. Javier is asking, any plan? You have any collaborations with any pharmas or any other biotech drug development companies?
Not right now. Doesn't mean we wouldn't, but we don't have right now. But we are working with a pretty large institution, non-corporate. But we'll talk about that sometime soon.
Okay. Let's see if we have any other questions. Okay. So, Dan, what kind of news flow can investors expect to see from Pharmadrug over the next, let's call it 90 days?
Over the next 3 months, we have a lot of news flow. We've been hard at work, and a lot of those things are going to start to bear fruit. So let's say over the next 30 days, you're going to see press releases on what I talked about, Cepharanthine being developed, moving forward as producing that pharmaceutical grade pill, that oral pill. You're going to see news on that. You're going to see news on creating patents or filing for provisional patents for Cepharanthine in cancer. You're going to see some COVID results and a development there. You're going to see DMT results. We're going to have ongoing DMT results over the next few months. So that's over the next 30 days. March, we'll start seeing the cancer results because we're working on an in vivo study. We're also going to get more DMT results. We're going to probably fine-tune or select our final molecule, what version of DMT we want to work on. That's going to happen in March, probably more COVID results. And then in April, we're going to get more cancer results, more development of Cepharanthine, We might be in a position to start an in vivo on glaucoma and DMT. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but at some point, Johns Hopkins, they're working on it right now. We're in talks with them. At some point, they're going to submit to the FDA to start that clinical trial. So that should come in the next 90 days. It's an estimate, but sometime around then. So, I don't know. I'm thinking, 8 to 12 updates over the next 3 months.
Okay, so the news pipeline, which is I think very, very important, definitely for investors, for our investor audience. I mean, investors, they really depend on news flow. So it looks like you have some really compelling catalysts in place in terms of news flow, which any one of these news releases could have a major upside impact on the stock price. Let's get into we'll get a couple more audience questions coming in here. Whitney's asking, does the FDA feedback about Cepharanthine's COVID application give you any insight into potential approval for the cancer application?
Yeah, well, I talked about the CMC already. Maybe Paul can add to that.
Yeah, so I mean, it was apparent that the FDA views Cepharanthine as a new drug in the US, despite the fact that it's been approved in Japan for 70 years. So it would be going through the same regulatory path as a new drug, but we can borrow from the experience of Japan. So we have work to do as it relates to safety toxicology studies. Again, just referencing the boilerplate type of studies that everyone needs to do. We're underway manufacturing the drug. We've lined up CROs to conduct some of these studies as we move forward. But, I think the path was laid out quite clearly. We've now identified a group to be running the COVID studies. So things are lining up, and it's really 2022 is full steam execution on all fronts.
Are you working with Health Canada?
No, not yet.
Okay. For the U.S., we have U.S. investors. What is Health Canada? Just
FDA Canada.
Okay, it's the FDA Canada. Okay, just to be clear, it's a whole different animal there. Okay. What about let's say the European market or other markets where in terms of getting approved? Because I know I think some companies I've heard of them doing. They get the drug approved like in Australia, and then they bring it. There's a whole process.
The one that would make the most sense, I'd lie if I told you we haven't actually looked into it, is Japan.
Okay.
So, to go into a market where they already have the drug and they're very comfortable with the drug, the hurdles there would be significantly lower than what the FDA would have. So, if we were to, double track in different countries, Japan would make sense, right?
Okay. So bottom line is there's a lot of news flow in place. A very exciting pipeline of news for the next 90 days. Dan, so we're going to have you back probably in a week or so. We'll focus kind of on the DMT side, other things. But to wrap up for today, what would you say, in your opinion? This is the question we always ask at the end of these interviews. In your opinion, what are the top 3 reasons why investors should consider Pharmadrug today?
I think one of the major ones is the drug development, specifically on the Cepharanthine side, that we have a drug that we know has been used in humans for 70 years. This is not a new potentially toxic substance, and that because of the high bioavailability that we have, we can use this for several different paths, and that we are moving that forward. Secondly, the reason why I think people should really be taking a look at us is the fact that we have multiple shots on goal on our clinical trial, and just one of them would be a multi-bagger from here. All the ones that we're working on would be, that type of return that, we were aspiring to, whether it's a 10, 20, 30 bagger, 40 bagger, could be even more. So, I think that the downside is so low compared to the upside we have with all the work that we're doing internally right now. And thirdly, on the psychedelic side, we're doing things that are extremely unique. Don't get me wrong. There are some psychedelic companies out there that are doing some really good work. But what we're doing is so unique but it's based on science that we already know. We're not guessing. So we think that there's a unique and high value added approach to our psychedelic strategy.
Okay. One question we had an audience question I completely forgot to ask you about, the team that you have in place at Pharmadrug. So it was a question about David Knickel. I believe he's one of your directors.
Dave Knickel is one of our directors.
And he's a biotech guy?
Yeah, he's a biotech guy. And the answer is no, we are not talking to AstraZeneca right now.
Okay. And Dan, can you kind of talk a little bit about kind of the management team, kind of the people that, the backgrounds of the people you have in place?
Right. So
talk about a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. I'm a finance guy, so I'm a capital markets person. I spent 20 years in investment banking and institutional brokerage, and I took on this company a few years ago, and that's my background. So I come from a financial background. Paul's got a pretty impressive science background. So I don't know, Paul, you want to talk about yourself?
So I did my PhD in vascular biology at University of Toronto. During my studies, I designed a whole new class of drugs to target a vascular receptor, spun out a company, co-founded that company, which is actually now a phase 2 biotech, Canadian private biotech, quite coincidentally, actually is in the clinic in the US for COVID. Treats the vascular complications related to COVID. So frankly, my background is in the COVID space to some extent, or treating pathogen-induced lung injury.
Okay, but just to clarify, a Pharmadrug is not a COVID stock. It's not a COVID play.
No.
You happen to be developing a potential treat, but that's just one of your things, just in case. Yeah. And I don't want anybody to all of a sudden say, "Oh, this is a COVID thing. COVID's going to go away."
No. We were going after cancer. We were going after cancer. There was so much scientific research that was coming out on the antiviral side that we couldn't ignore it. But I wouldn't. If you asked me, describe yourself in 3 words, it would not be a COVID company. No.
Okay, excellent. Okay, on that note, guys, I want to thank you, and we look forward to hearing more from Pharmadrug in the weeks ahead. I think we're going to have you back probably in a week to get into some more details. We've got a lot of questions which we haven't had time to address. Hopefully, we can get to the more audience questions next week. Talk about kind of the DMT drug development pipeline and onwards. So again, thank you, and thank you everybody for joining our live stream today. We'll see you all on the next one.
Great.
Thanks.